everyone. Hello. Hello, everyone. If I can get... Thank you. Hello, everyone. If I can get your attention. Hello, everyone. If we could start kind of taking our seats. We have been waiting for a couple additional members of our board here to arrive. We're almost at a quorum. We would love to have you all take a seat. We're probably going to go ahead and start the meeting without the quorum because we have a very long agenda.
Are these supposed to be ergonomic?
It's already 7 minutes past 7, and if we have any hopes of getting finished in a reasonable time frame, we need to get started. I think I'm sure that we will have another member. The traffic coming up from the South Bay was pretty horrific. So let's just begin our meeting. I will call this meeting to order, December 6th, and ask James to give us a roll call.
City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors Office. City and County of San Francisco Mayor's Office. City and County of San Francisco Airport Commission.
Ivar Satterell here.
San Mateo County Board of Supervisors.
Dave Hine.
CCAG Land Use Commission. Town of Atherton.
Elizabeth Lewis.
City of Belmont.
Doug Kim.
City of Brisbane.
Terry O'Connell.
City of Burlingame. City of Daly City. City of Foster City. City of Half Moon Bay. Town of Hillsborough.
Al Royce, present.
City of Menlo Park. City of Millbrae.
Snyder.
City of Pacifica.
Sue DeGree.
Town of Portola Valley.
Ann Wingert.
City of Redwood City. City of San Bruno. City of San Carlos. City of San Mateo. City of South San Francisco is about to walk in the door.
Mark Adiego.
And Town of Woodside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And we have a quorum.
Well, wasn't that nice timing of Vice Chair Mark Adiego? Thank you for coming.
I got lost with the construction fencing.
I tried to warn everybody. I did.
You did.
Okay, so let me see. I haven't been paying attention. I've got, let's see, a number of speaker slips. Charlie, when do you want to speak? I don't care. Well, item number 2 is public comments now. Okay, all right. All right. So I have 2 public speakers for this public comment section, and I'll have you, Charlie. You can start. We'd like to give you 2 minutes, but there's not a whole lot of public speakers, so you might take a little more time today.
All right,
if you
my name
have
is
more
Charlie
to say.
Wambeck, and I'm from San Francisco. There's a couple of things. On the agenda item for public speaking, it says here, number 2, it says speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Roundtable members cannot discuss or take action on any matter raised under this item. Well, I don't quite understand that, but my mother always taught me, she said, you can go to the movies, but you may not, okay? So I don't think there's anything you cannot do. So I would hope that if people get up here and mention things at a public forum, that, you would consider them sooner or later. Yeah. All right. The other thing is, I know it's been a policy of the Roundtable not to shift noise. Well, you know what? I've been thinking about that a little bit, and noise has already been shifted. All right. I've lived in my house 50 years this last June, and I hear more planes in one day than I heard in the first 48 years combined. Okay, so the noise has already shifted. So I think it's kind of baloney about not shifting noise. It's got to go someplace. And I don't mind sharing noise, but, I know one of the things is tracks in the sky. Well, one of the railroad tracks that comes right over our house, goes right over Visitation Valley. And I'm sure that many of people sitting in this room have planes going right over their homes too. So I don't say it's only me, although that's the one it affects most is me. And that's it. Okay, as far as, airlines are becoming big business. There's an article here. U.S. private equity firms places near $50 billion jet order for Airbus. So now we've got investment groups, buying airplanes so they can set up all kinds of routes. This is a really, really, really big business. If we're so ecologically concerned, maybe we should stop flying so much.
Thank you, Charlie. Let me just have our vice chair respond to your first comment about why we can't respond.
Yeah, actually, Elizabeth and I have spoken about this because in many public meetings, when the body sits mute after somebody brings up some interesting questions or comments, it looks as if we're not interested. But we are somewhat tied. If it's not an item on the agenda, we can't have a healthy debate and reach any conclusion.
I don't mind not discussing it in a debate afterwards, but it's just the wording says they cannot discuss it or consider it. Well, if you don't consider what people say when they get up here, what's the purpose of us coming? We have
I'll just clarify that a little, because in this public comment period, it's for items that are not on the agenda, and if something has not been publicly noticed for all the rest of the world to come and hear the debate on, we cannot give that discourse. It's not fair to the other members of the public. So if you want to make comments on something that is agendized, then we can have more public discourse. Okay.
I never figured it out until somebody gets up there and speaks what I want to speak on. Because,
Right, exactly. All right. So our next public speaker is Ray Ramos from Pacifica. Item not on the agenda, right?
Yes.
Okay.
This is not really for the board at all, but in the spirit of trying to get the community members to have more. Is it on?
No, turn it on.
Now? Many of us, and just like you mentioned, wonder about communications. And a lot of the people that come here don't really get a chance to exchange how to connect with each other. I've tried to get some of your sign-in, but based on the advice of counsel to this group, they redacted all your contact information. So what I'd like to do is leave a clipboard in the back, and if any of you would care to join and give other people here your email address, then we can start communicating among ourselves. There are a lot of people that have various interests, all the way from potential litigation to better ways to have communications between the public and the roundtable, such as the workshops that were kind of started at the last technical subcommittee. Unfortunately, we got the FAA report one day after that meeting was held. That's all. I'm going to leave it in the back along with their sign-in. If you want to give us your email contact information, please do.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to close item 2, public comment period. We are, let me make sure that this is not going to go off. Okay. before we go to the consent agenda items, I'd like to introduce a couple of people who are here in our audience today from the FAA. See, I knew I didn't do it right. And from the San Francisco airport. So Than McLeod is here. She's from the NorCal TRACON and has been very involved with us over the years in answering technical questions from us. The gentleman sitting next to her is David Swanson. Stand up. He's with the San Francisco airport. He's the tower manager, relatively new hire. Welcome. I'm going to let you take this while I stop choking. Number 3.
Okay.
The consent agenda is number 3 and 4.
Okay, so we're taking up consent items 3 and 4. Let's see, August 2nd meeting overview. Is there any comment from the body on item 3? And then the review of the airport director's reports, fly quiet reports for the dates indicated. Any questions or comments? So we're looking for a motion to approve the consent items?
Make a motion.
items 3 and 4 on the consent calendar.
Thank you all.
Second.
And a second.
I think you have some speaker notifications there.
Do we have on that? We certainly do. So we'd like to invite Ray Ramos back for consent item number 3.
And number 4.
You might as well, huh?
Consent item 3 is basically the overview. I believe at the 2 August meeting, I brought up that item 5 on that agenda, having to do with the director's report, it did not include an item for the departures tracking similar to what the arrivals is given. And I believe the board basically gave direction at that time by acclamation that they wanted that included. When it comes to the report that's going to be given tonight, I noticed that it's not in there.
Okay. I remember the same conversation. So is that, you have a slip both for number 3 and number 4? That was your follow-up comment for number 4? On the report?
It will be, unless there's something else.
I mean, you have the floor. Okay, please. Art.
Mr. Ramos is correct. We did hear, though, and it will be in the next reports coming.
Thank you for the quick
The big
answer.
problem is trying to label everything, since we're adding so much to it, that it makes it a mess in that small image.
Okay. Thank you, Bert. Mr. Ramos, did you have more for number 4?
No, I'd like to see it. Maybe you could go back when you give it to the next meeting in February. Give those trackings for what has been asked for since June.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ramos. And so we were about to vote, I believe.
We can provide those to the roundtable.
Thank you, Bert.
Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstained from number 3. I wasn't here.
I abstain as well.
Okay, we have 2 abstentions for consent item number 3, Ann Wengert of Portola Valley and Rick Bonilla of San Mateo. Okay, abstentions, and the motion passes. Okay, so on to our regular agenda, item number 5. I'm going to turn it over happily to Ivar, and he needs a microphone.
Actually, Doug will take it.
Oh, and then
and
Doug's
then
going to
Ivar.
take it.
Well-
Doug, would you like to come up here? I'll give you my, oh, you go up there? Okay. Uh-huh. That's going to come out.
Good evening.
Hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Doug Yakel with SFO, and a few meetings ago, we proposed a modified format for
what we report out to you in this roundtable. And really, step number one was to shift some of our traditional reports, like the fly quiet and the director's report, to a consent agenda that we just went through. So real quick today, I wanted to present kind of where we're at with that evolution of presenting a different type of information to you, tell you where we're at, and get a little feedback from you. So among the things that we wanted to cover, a little bit of data overview, kind of maybe some different data, and really that would include a heat map of where we're getting noise complaints from, and then also a method really to track the intensity of flights over communities. And that's still very much a work in progress, but I can show you a little bit about where we're at with that. But let's start with the noise complaints. This is for the month of October, and this is essentially a heat map. It shows where we're getting the most complaints. And the last time we talked about this, we had a recommendation that we track people, not the number of complaints. So this represents that based on that feedback. This is a representation of how many people in these particular areas filed complaints with us without regard to how many complaints those individuals filed. The next thing I want to show you is what we're working on in terms of trying to plot out, trying to track the impact of flights over communities. And really, step number one is what we call a density map. And this is a flight density map for the month of October 2017. This essentially shows the average number of flights going over our communities on a daily basis. This is essentially a heat map of its own. So in the color, the coolest shade of blue or the darkest shade of blue represents 50 or fewer flights per day. And then it's essentially a spectrum all the way up to red, and the red section really shows over 150 flights per day in those particular areas. And as you can see, the greatest concentration obviously is right at those runways, right where those departures and arrivals are taking off. Now, if we back it up and look at complaints versus these flight tracks, you can see that there is some correlation. So a good example is this batch of complaints right here. It really aligns up with what has been talked about quite a bit, and that is that shift from the Big Sur to the Surfer 1 track. So that correlates very closely. Another good example would be where we see this activity in the range running from Palo Alto to Sunnyvale. And if you look at how that matches up with flight activity, you've got quite a bit here. You've got this turning activity, you've got Moffett Field, you've got this track right here. So there is some correlation to that. Just for perspective, we also plotted out what this looked like 3 years ago. So here's that same month in October 2014, and you might say, well, what's different? And really, I'd point out a couple of things to you here because we see a good example of what's been talked about quite a bit here, and that is the more focused concentration of aircraft over certain communities. And a great example can be seen right here. So look in October 2014, you see a lot of yellow and green, very widespread. You shift it to October 2017, you see that's very, very focused on a finer line. So for those communities that are right under that area, that's kind of where we're hearing from folks that they're seeing a greater concentration of aircraft. Another example, obviously, is this Surfer 1. You can see where it compare it to the Scotts Valley label right there, and then the shift in 2017. So the one thing that I would stress with this is this does not include altitude, and this does not include noise. So those are kind of two other elements that we need to find a way to integrate into this, but this was just kind of a starting point for this discussion. So I'll pause right here real quick if there's any questions on this map. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we don't seem to have this in our packet. Are we going to be able to access this?
Yeah, the idea is this is kind of an initial presentation, and if this is something that you want to start seeing in the package, we would certainly be adding it. Ann.
I understand what you're doing here, and this is a great demonstration of it, but it certainly doesn't show those of our communities who are affected by backblast. Sorry, folks. I thought I could get through one whole meeting without backblast, but it's very misleading, actually, and I know you said it doesn't include noise. So when you look at this, it's like, heck, Millbrae's getting no noise at all. So I'm not overly comfortable with that, even understanding how the data that you're trying to reflect. One workaround might be that if you're going to use that, you might say exactly, well, it's saying average flights. Maybe it needs to say not showing noise.
Yeah.
because I wouldn't want someone to look at this and say, well, Millbrae, you've got nothing to complain about.
Sure. And as I said, that's great feedback, and this continues to be a work in progress, because I think the one thing we do want to weave in here is noise and perhaps altitude as well. So this is just kind of showing you where we're at in this process. So appreciate that feedback. And again, this, if it's not useful to this body, we don't want to show it. This has got to be something that's of interest to you. So moving forward, some of the other things that we were talking about are airline outreach. You know, Bert's team continues to meet with airlines. Since our last meeting, his team has met with both Air New Zealand and Singapore Airlines, really to talk about how those airlines can improve their scores, more of a general overview. We've been talking to Hawaiian Airlines. They typically use the ones for their departure and make a left turn over San Francisco. We've been trying to get them to use the 28s instead to go out through the gap. Not 100% receptive, but we continue those discussions. We've also been talking with United Airlines about some new noise-friendly departures on the 28s. Ivar may touch on that in a little bit more detail. Also want to talk a little bit about airline news as it pertains to our airport. We've always got airlines that are coming and going. So recently we had Air Berlin, who was flying to Berlin and Dusseldorf out of SFO, filed for bankruptcy. They ceased operations in October. We also had Etihad, who flies to Abu Dhabi, pull out of the San Francisco market, citing competition from carriers like Air India. So their last operations was also at the end of October. Two new airlines that have announced plans to launch service at SFO in 2018, Hong Kong Airlines, nonstop to Hong Kong. They're going to operate 4 flights a week beginning in March of 2018. They're going to use an Airbus A350, which is the newest aircraft that Airbus makes. Also, Iberia announced that they're going to start service nonstop to Madrid. That'll be 3 days a week beginning in beginning in April of 2018. They're going to use an Airbus A330 aircraft. Aircraft retirement, you probably saw this in the news quite a bit. United Airlines no longer offers service in their 747. They retired it. Final flight was out of SFO on November 7th. There's only 3 airlines left at SFO that use the 747. That's Air China, British Airways, and Qantas that continue to use that aircraft type right now. Also, Southwest Airlines retired 67 of its older Boeing 737 aircraft. Those were replaced with the latest generation, the 737 MAX. This is an aircraft that's about 40% quieter than the old aircraft. And with that, I'd be happy to take any other questions or feedback.
I have a quick question. When you say it's 40% quieter, is that on the inside or the outside? Because I know that I have flown on both of those aircraft, and it's much quieter on the inside. But
my understanding, and Bert can correct me, is that that is the exterior noise. In other words, the engine noise from the aircraft.
Okay, all right. Yes, inside as well. So,
Yeah.
Ian?
And is that the in-flight noise or the takeoff and landing noise?
Every aspect of operation.
All 3 types of noise would be reduced.
Any other roundtable members have a question? Anne?
Yeah, Doug, I'm wondering whether or not it makes any sense to include any updates on the replacement of the Airbus Vortex generators, which has obviously been high on the list of priorities for everybody here.
Be happy to include that. Bert has a slide on that.
Okay.
Yes. Glenn?
I want to say that was a great presentation. I thank you so much. It's good and useful information. Thank you.
Chair?
Doug, as a representative of South San Francisco, and it's 68,000 people, should I be concerned that you're encouraging Hawaiian Airlines to stop using 1 and use 28 in the gap?
It's a fair question, and Bert can weigh in a little bit more. The thought is that its ability to climb might be better if it's departing off of the 28s as to the 1s. If you want to elaborate on that at all.
It's a daytime aircraft. Fortunate. 9 a.m. We don't like to say go from one area to another. In short, on that one. Simply, we've had complaints about it. We do have some flights go out through the gap, and typically through the gap we don't get the complaints that we do from South San Francisco for it. That's not to say that we won't in the future, but we're asking for that they've already said they don't want to do it. It is a fuel issue for them.
You know, we've had this conversation before about, different communities have different tolerance for noise. So there's a high tolerance in South San Francisco over, the last decades. And so if you're not hearing from us and you need to, I don't want to get into this mode, but no, I'm not too pleased to hear that you're actively encouraging Hawaiian Air to fly up the middle of the valley. And whether it's 9 p.m. or 9 a.m., it's still more noise to those communities, South San Francisco, Colma, and Daly City especially, as you get close to the Gap. Not pleased to hear that, Doug.
We do have an issue to address, gap noise, that Ivar will touch on.
Okay. Well, excuse me. No, we'll go through the chair. Thank you very much. Any other roundtable members? I've got a couple of speaker questions. Peter Grace would like to comment on this.
Just real fast, I need people to speak into their microphones, come up and use that helps me a lot at the end, do my minutes, because I actually need to have it transcribed. And so when it's not in vocal, it's not in the minutes.
Peter, you have 2 minutes, okay,
Yeah.
as a response.
Can I just say this was very, very helpful doing a density map. Mike, I've got sort of technical concerns is the size of the squares you're using to determine the density. If you make them really narrow, you have fewer red. If you make them really wide, you have a lot more red. So I hope you can share with us how those squares are determined. The second one is I'd like you to put on the board, on the screen, the difference between 2014 and 2017. I'd like to look at what is happening on runway 1R, where the flights go out the bay. And I'd like you to explain what's happening. Can we put up October? Can we put up 14 and 17? Can I ask for a pause at the moment? Otherwise, I'm going to get timed out without being able to ask any questions.
So what what are we doing?
The graphics that were up earlier.
Oh.
It's a really good idea. Well, obviously.
Along with all of Bert's professional duties as the noise abatement officer, he is an electrician, so he will give you his card for any electrical issues or technical issues you may have at home. He does charge for it, though. We get this for free.
And do you want me to defer while they sort this out and other people speak until the technical problems rather than hold the meeting up?
Peter, I think that's a great idea. Jay Patel, do you need any technical assistance, or can you just come up and talk? I can come up. Thank you.
Jay Patel, Brisbane. First of all, I'd like to thank you. That report was very helpful, Doug. So I encourage, more output. One of the things you brought up, and it's been bothering me for a while, Brisbane has been shifted on by the Hawaiian Airline flight. They've been shifted to one. They bother me. They bother my community. It's a problem. It's a shift prior. That was not a normal flight. I've been logging flights ever since they shifted the bloody flights to stick, from SEPTI to stick. And Hawaiian is a new thing, relatively new. So I take complete exception to your statement. There's a no shifting policy, right? They got shifted to my community and over my house, especially Hawaiian Airlines. I clearly see that. It's a new thing. So my question, when I came up here, prior to submitting, coming up here, I was going to ask the airport, what pressure can you do to force Hawaiian Airlines to really go back to where they came from and not go over one? I mean, it's a problem. So it's a health issue for me. I mean, it's a problem. So one of the things we've talked about prior years was trying to hold airlines accountable other than just giving them an award at the end of the month or end of the quarter. So this is a classic example of trying to get Hawaiian Airlines' feet to the fire. And so Brisbane's been shifted on. They weren't going over one before. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So are we ready for Peter to finish up or not? Are we ready? Okay.
Can we put up the flight density maps for 2017 and 2014? Sorry, maybe I'm too early.
Okay.
Can we go back? Can we go back to okay, and go back to 14? What I'd like to look at is
Peter, not with the
compare it
microphone.
to what's happening in 2014, 2017. Can we push 2017 up? A whole load of planes have disappeared. At least that's what I see. And I believe they're coming over Brisbane. We're ending up with flights for Fort Lauderdale, Houston, Miami.
Yep, absolutely.
And the question is, what has happened? Can someone please explain what has happened? Can you go back to 2014? What's happened to all these flights? Where have they gone?
Okay. Bert, are you going to respond? Okay. Thank you.
From 2014, we can see this departure here. You can see some of the departures going on different routes. What the FAA did, let's go to 2017, Anthony. As you can see, these concentrated spokes right here, which is what RNAV is, and that's the flights being assigned on these other routes. So we don't have this haze of aircraft being fanned out through here. We have these very concentrated spokes, which is where the aircraft have gone.
Do you know what the altitude would be on any of that, the spokes at that?
It varies, but we're talking typically 6,000, 8,000 and growing out here. They're climbing.
Are they coming out of Oakland?
These are out of SFO. There are some Oakland flights mixed in later, but this conglomerate right here is what you see of the Oakland activity along with SFO. But this deep red band you see coming up to Oakland is SFO. And these are Oakland departures here.
Okay. All right. We have one more speaker request for this item. Aaron Denzier? Deinzer. Okay. D-E-I-N. From Montara.
Nervous, but I'll try. Am I doing it right?
You're doing good.
Okay. So I just had a couple of quickie questions. The first thing is I wanted to find out who actually agrees to add additional flights. In other words, if an airline comes to you and says, hey, we now want a SFO, if we would like to now add this route or we'd like to fly out of SFO and we haven't before, does the airport decide? Does the FAA tell you you have to? Is it, in other words, like what's that process? And the second thing is I was wondering, like I come from a community, Montara, which doesn't have very many residents. And so we have a lot of flights. I've just met with Dave, who shared with me, we had testing done in my backyard. But we're a small community. So maybe if we have, 50 people that are calling in from a small community, well, there's not as many people in a larger community. In other words, you'll hear less from us, even though we may be equally as impacted. And the other thing to tag onto that is, do people know? I mean, I think in those kinds of neighborhoods, maybe they're already familiar with the process of calling and complaining, but I don't know that people even realize that they have the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So, Doug, you're going to respond real quickly.
Yeah. So, number one, as it pertains to airlines choosing to go to particular airports, airports in the U.S., like SFO, are prohibited by federal law from saying yes, no, fly this way, fly that way. So airports really don't have the ability to say, yes, you can come, but you can't, or you can fly to Madrid, but not to Barcelona, things of that nature. Airlines really kind of make those as individual business decisions, and that's kind of why you saw the ebb and flow. Some carriers deciding to vacate, others deciding to start service at SFO. On the second question, in terms of the way that we report out on complaint information, We're open to whatever the roundtable thinks is the best approach. In other words, we want this report out to be useful to your discussions. I think really what launched us on this effort was a desire to align what we present with what we're talking about in this room here. And if there's not value in something that's being presented, then we won't present it. But similarly, if we want to agree on a particular methodology, we're a resource for you. So we certainly defer to that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. So, Ivar, are you going to finish this up?
Yes. Okay, I appreciate the comment about recommending the airport recommending a certain departure, and we are committed not to doing that and recommending shifting of any departures unless we can show you that there is a benefit, noise benefit to all and no adverse impact. So we're committed to that, and we take that point seriously, both the gentleman from Brisbane as well as Mark. So I want to commit to that. So a couple updates. Well, the comment about the comments that are made in public session, what I try to do is when I hear things that I may have information about or it may be something and ask of the airport, I take that back and my team talk about it. And then at the next meeting, I tend to report out in this segment of things that I heard last time. So that's how, as an airport operator, we intend to respond to some of the public comments. So it means you have to come to a second meeting, but that's how we feel we can follow up on those issues best with all of you. We have our noise mitigation program, our second chance noise insulation program, and this is about insulating homes within the 65 decibel CNEL. We are committed, for those of you that weren't here last time, to putting $1 million aside a year, a budget, starting July 1 of next year, to re-insulate homes that have failed noise insulation programs that they opted for in the original program. Perhaps homeowners opted out originally and now are impacted because of the change in flight patterns. One thing I didn't mention was if eligible residents went and invested in their own noise insulation windows, we would consider reimbursing that cost as well. So I don't think I mentioned that last time. So July 1 is when that starts up, and we'll be working on a criteria of how we determine who is most impacted and therefore will have a higher priority than others. Noise Abatement Office, I'm pleased to announce Nastasia, as we continue to grow our capabilities and expertise, we're pleased to announce Nastasia. Is Nastasia? I thought I saw you earlier. There she is. Has been promoted to our senior noise abatement specialist, and we're pleased that she continues to do great work on behalf of the Noise Abatement Office. There was a question last time about run-ups, and if we can go ahead and put that graph on there. And the question was about engine run-ups and what's been happening with engine run-ups. And so just to show basically nighttime engine run-ups over time, from 2005 to 2017, we've been successful in reducing these from 475 per year back in 2005 to 100 this past year. And so we continue to enforce our rules and regs around engine run-ups, and unless absolutely necessary for an early morning flight departure, the airlines are no longer requesting engine run-ups during those hours, 12 p.m. to 7 a.m.
That's pretty significant.
It's very helpful, I think, certainly for the residents. There was a question that was asked, is someone recalled that the airport had committed to building a run-up enclosure, and we did some research on that. And when we were pursuing a runway program, Runways in the Bay, for those of you who were around in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had a program to add runways in the Bay. We abandoned that program shortly after 9/11, but there was an enclosure proposed with the runways program, and it was because we were capturing a lot of more land to make a site available for it. We looked at, is there an opportunity in our current footprint to get a run-up enclosure done, and it's just not feasible with our current footprint. So I did want to just follow back on that question. This relates to the run-up curve. So in lieu of the enclosure, we continue to drive down the need for nighttime run-ups, and we'll continue to do so. A discussion about the 28 left departures. Our folks have been working with the FAA to have a departure that has a faster gain in altitude. And the idea is on departure, a more aggressive takeoff slopes. Instead of sometimes you'll see a very slow and steady rise through the gap. What our desire is for a more aggressive climb out to get altitude sooner and be less impactful to the community. And so it's something we're working on. Did we have a chart on that, Bert? On that? Okay. So it's called the close-in noise abatement departure procedure, and we'll continue to keep you informed as we continue to pursue that with the FAA.
Just a question on that?
Yes.
So the hope would be that the FAA would make that a required departure route?
It would be part of the noise abatement procedures that would get implemented.
But is it an FAA deal,
Yeah,
or
I mean,
is it
because
the
how do you get
airport?
people to fly it?
Yeah.
I'll ask Bert comment further.
Bert's going to put the heavy on.
The FAA has a procedure called AC 91-53A. To be very technical on this, sorry, a bit of a coarse throat, so I may not get too loud for you. I'll try, though. The two differences under this are a close-in or a distant noise abatement departure procedure. We're looking at the close-in. We're asking aircraft to use a steeper angle on their departure, so they're using more power, more fuel, to climb to a higher altitude over or close into the airport before they nose over and climb out under a reduced power setting. Some of you are familiar with it from Orange County Airport. Similar to that, although not quite as arduous as theirs. So that's what we're looking to. And been working with the FAA on that, and we'll be hopefully getting that implemented and then working on a test period for that so that we can make sure that we're doing right by the community.
So through the chair, Bert, would that make it where communities closer into the airport are going to get more noise initially while that climb is being made?
The goal is for those using runway 28 left, 28 right to climb over the airport, so not over the communities. That's the goal. Now, as with anything else, the goal may prove to be a bit different than reality. We would do the test period to make sure that we're doing it right. If we end up not getting what we want, we'll reverse it.
Any other remarks?
And you'll let us know when that process is starting to take place?
Definitely.
Thank you.
I'll respond to that.
Yes, Gene?
So to further respond to your question, so the FAA has two noise abatement departure procedures. One's called the close in, one's called the far out. NADP 1, it's the close in. NADP 2 is the far out. And what it's intended for is that the NADP 1 is to benefit people closer into the airport. NADP 2 is to benefit people a little bit further away from the airport. And since San Francisco has a coastline that would be about where the far out procedure would be beneficial, it makes sense to try the close in here to benefit the people, as we've been saying, through the gap.
And just a couple more, thanks Bert. A couple more items. Portable noise monitoring update. We have the quarterly report completed, and we've completed our report for Brisbane. Portola Valley, Woodside, permanent portable noise monitors were deployed in October, and ad hoc portable noise monitors were deployed this last quarter in Montera, Belmont, and 2 in San Francisco. We have 5 more scheduled for the coming months, portable noise monitoring. And then just one last note, something I'm very passionate about, if you will, alternative jet fuels. And SFO is taking a very much of a leadership role in helping drive sustainable aviation fuels in the industry, along with United and along with the fueling industry. There are these refineries, particularly in Europe, that are expressing an interest on establishing capacity in the U.S., and California may have an opportunity because of legislation around the low carbon fuel standard, which gives tax benefits and allows for the comparison of costs between standard aviation jet fuel and alternative jet fuel to close that gap that helps to drive a demand from the airlines. And so we've convened a couple roundtables with the investment community, with the airlines, with the fuel providers, with the regulatory agencies, and are over the next year setting goals around the use of alternative aviation fuel out of SFO. And our ultimate goal is to get it as part of the delivery of our whole hydrant fueling system. So all aircraft departing SFO have a mix with alternative jet fuel in it. It has significant greenhouse gas emissions reductions, improvements, as well as particulate matter particulate matter reduction. So from an air quality perspective, it is a great innovation. I think it's forthcoming, and we need to drive an industry in that direction. And so we're positioning ourselves to be part of the leadership of that. We will continue to keep you informed on that as well.
Sounds great.
That's what I have.
Very cool. We have a comment. Anne, would you like to make your comment?
Well, this is going backwards when you talked about the 100 nighttime run-ups. Bert, I had the opportunity to have a tour of the airport, which was great, and I saw the what I thought were two locations where the run-ups occurred. Or do they occur in more places? And if so, would it help my peers here as well as me if we had a map that said if they're doing a run-up from the one over by the Coast Guard station, that noise is going towards South San Francisco and Safe Harbor Shelter, et cetera, and the other one, and I can't quite remember where the other one was. It was more on the Millbrae-Burlingame side. And as well as the discussion that if we shift from 1 to 28, and you're doing a steeper climb, are you affecting the homes in San Bruno right by Tanforan, or are you affecting the hotels on the other side of the freeway? I'd be really interested in seeing some maps that sort of show where the fan of noise goes. And I understand that it could be 3 different types, or in this case, 2 different types of noise, the takeoff noise and the in-flight noise. It would help me have a better idea that I don't want to shift noise onto the gap. I'm under the gap quite often, and it's, oh my gosh. But if we went from 1 to 28, or is it better one right than one left? Can it come out and go out through the bay? Maybe we'd have a better idea of not trying to shift onto our neighboring cities, but what exactly are we doing when we do move the runways? Does that make sense?
I'll try to break that down a bit for you.
I kind of shifted from
I think I get your point about run-ups. What we'll do is give you more information on. We have 2 run-up pads. I think the one out by the intersection of the runways is the most heavily utilized run-up pad, which points basically out to the bay to the south. So I don't know what that noise envelope looks like. Regarding the gap departure work, the close-in, we're not going to do something that increases a noise footprint on a community. And so until we have more information about what rates of climbs that can be established and how that would play out and how quickly, like Bert said, we want them taken off. And by the time they're at the end of the airport, we want them way up in the air. And so we really don't have a lot of information, but we will share that as we develop it.
Great, thank you.
Maybe a la John Wayne, right?
Wow, that was me.
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, sir. Bert.
Anthony.
Is it your turn?
Well, just wanted to dovetail on the director's comments here. We were asked about the wake vortex generators.
Yeah.
So we received some information from United just late this afternoon. For those of you unfamiliar, these ports under the wing, there's 2 on each side, and they put this device on just in front of it. It disrupts the airflow so you don't get that tone like blowing over a Coke bottle. This aircraft, when it's about 20 miles from an airport, can generate some noise that sounds like a howl or a moan, and it's been very disturbing to people. Our first airline is United that's actually done this, and they're in process. As of November 10th, 8 aircraft have been retrofitted with the Wake Vortex generators. They believe they'll have 2 more by the end of the year, but installations are being performed in Sweden, San Francisco, Duluth, Minnesota, and Lake County, Florida. They're done during the heavy maintenance checks, and once this year is complete, it should be on track for 25 to 30 aircraft a year.
Out of a fleet of how many? Out of a fleet of how many?
I need to get that count for you.
I think we've got hundreds.
It's going to take about 5 years.
Yeah. Well, that's a beginning. It's a start. Thank you, Bert. I'm going to move on to our next agenda item as Bert is teed up to do this. Item number 6, presentation on GBAS. He's going to take 10 minutes.
Well, we're swinging for 10 minutes. I'd like to introduce a gentleman by the name of William GBAS.
Got to find our slides.
Boeing. The gentleman from Boeing Aircraft, his name is William Peterson. He's a project engineer. I've worked with him as well as my manager, John Bergner, on the GPS landing system, also known as GBAS. So if you would please, sir, come on up and join us. He has a few slides to go through, and we'll let you go.
All right. Thank you, Bert. And thank you, everybody, for having me here. This is a joy of mine. And I just want to say before I jump into this, just click. Okay, before I jump into this, it was a blessing to really work with San Francisco Airport, the NorCal Air Traffic Control, and United and Delta in this demo. It was very successful, and hopefully you'll see some of the results out of here that are very positive. So just a little bit on the system, GBAS, not sure how familiar you are with it, but I know, Bert, you mentioned RNAV before, which is area navigation, basically using GPS to navigate the airplane. Well, GPS landing system is just an extension of that, using GPS to actually land the airplane. And there's basically 3 functions, the GPS satellite system, which is always up there. And then on the airplane, you have electronics, more or less a supercomputer that uses a lot of the GPS and talks with the satellites, and also the ground-based augmentation system, which will be installed at the airport. All these talk together to provide a good landing capability. So when you start looking at all the different leaders around the world implementing these technologies, so San Francisco is there. I know. So I'm from Seattle. Seattle's also investing in this technology solution. Houston and Newark Airport have implemented this technology a few years back, and one of the big international airports that's really leading this is Fraport, and they're doing it for some of the noise abatement reasons. And then you see a lot of other countries starting to move this direction, trying to catch up to the U.S. I just actually got back from Tokyo last week, and Haneda Airport is actually implementing this for noise abatement reasons as well as other efficiencies. And then when you talk about the airlines, so I tried to identify some of the airlines that fly to this airport. So you see a lot of the big carriers, they're investing in this technology, putting it on their airplanes. So once San Francisco is up and running, they can leverage this capability. Okay, so what we actually demonstrated were various things. So the GBAS or GPS landing system, it's really like it's additional tool that adds more flexibility just to your operations from a noise abatement perspective and also from an emissions reductions perspective. It also enables ability to land in all weather conditions. So if the winds are at a certain direction within San Francisco, you start landing at different runways. This system actually provides landing capability at all runway ends. So San Francisco has, I think, 8 runway ends. So it enable landing to all those runways. I believe the current system you have, the instrument landing system, there's only 3 runway ends that actually have that. So again, GBAS provides additional flexibility for the airport to operate. And then also, I'll show you here shortly what else it could do from a separation standpoint of the airplanes. And then lastly, it can actually deconflict some airspace. We did demonstrate some deconfliction with Oakland Airspace. And then here's actually on Aviation Week. So they actually published an article on the demonstration. The gentleman that wrote this was on a United airplane when we did this demonstration. And I believe it was in August of last year when we did it, with a United airplane and a Delta airplane. So here's just a couple of procedures that our company, Jeppesen, they're part of Boeing company, actually developed. And it was a collaborative effort between the airport, between NorCal Air Traffic Control, and Boeing and Jeppesen. You can see the little circles up top just identifies what kind of procedures these are, which are GLS procedures. But the important thing I wanted to highlight is you notice here on the approach to the runway, it's a 3.25 degree glide slope. So that's a little bit more inclined than your typical 3 degree. And I'll show you what that really means here in a little bit. And also with the technology, you can actually land further down the runway because it's GPS, it's digital information, so you can actually put the airplane wherever you need it. So here's a picture of just showing, so this is a flight path on 28 right, the green one. And this is actually the GLS procedure, and you can see that it's actually landing 2,000 feet down the runway. And the glide slope is increased by about 1/4 degree. And if you look at comparison to the airplane flying the ILS system, there's a bigger vertical separation. So this just kind of demonstrates the capability of the tool. And so this is a noise plot of 28 left using the current ILS system. And if you notice, just pay attention to these kind of spots right here. I'll talk about that more in general, but that's more or less a level off. When you're flying into the airport, right, you're leveling off. So that's providing actually pilots putting more thrust into the engine, which is creating more noise and creating more emissions. And with the GLS procedure, if you notice, it's a nice curved approach. You see more consistent path, and you don't see these little bubbles in here. And I'll show you what that actually means when you go to the next slide. So the red line right here is the actual path you typically fly today with the ILS system, and you notice 2 level offs. So those 2 level offs, you know, the pilot's throttling up. So that's more or less when you're in your car and you're just revving up your engine, right? And you don't want that, right? You're next to a guy and they're revving up their engine. It's a lot more noise, and they're burning a lot more fuel. With the GLS demonstration we just did a nice continuous descent approach. So that really reduced a lot of the noise, and it reduced a lot of the emissions too as well. So I think that's all I had, and I think, John, you're going to come talk about the schedule?
So, yeah, thanks, Bill. That was a great presentation. So just wanted to touch on the schedule a little bit. Oh, by the way, for folks who don't know me, my name is John Bergner. I'm the planning director at the airport, work with Bert. And so, you know, we committed to this project a little bit earlier this year and immediately started the programming and the contracting with Honeywell that provides the system. And so that's underway right now. And then the next steps are going to be a site assessment starting early next year. And then it's really a kind of a 2-part parallel process with the equipment installation and testing. And that'll be done by September of 2019. And then starting early next year, there's also kind of this parallel approach procedure development process. You know, as Bill mentioned, this is all about, you know, approaches and landing at the airport. And, you know, that's going to be a collaborative process between the airport, airlines, and FAA, and there will be a public input portion of that as well. And then once that's complete, there will be training and implementation, and we can get these procedures in effect. So I think Bill and I will take any questions if we have it now.
Sorry, what's the end date? The end date, John?
Sorry, once again, it's September of 2019 is when we're expecting this to be in place.
Any member of the roundtable like to comment on this? Sue?
Sounds great. So you're going to include the public. Do you have an idea how that's going to be? Is that going to go through us, or how's that going to go?
You know, we haven't talked about the details of that. You know, that's only going to get started next year. But you know, I expect it'll probably come through the roundtable in some form or another. Yeah. You know, I think, you know, we did the procedures that were part of the test last year. Several of those were like offset approaches to move traffic off of, for example, Foster City. the continuous descent approaches with higher glide slope angles, which raise traffic further away from the airport. I think we have a pretty good idea of what the community in general wants, but we want your review on some of those things as well.
Anne?
Yeah, just one thing to sort of set expectations. What would you expect in your numbers now? You're looking at this, the number of airlines that will be able to participate at the time you're ready to go in September of 19.
Bill, I don't know if you have better numbers. I know the last I saw there was about, United had about 200 aircraft, Delta had about 200 aircraft. Many of the other international airlines had hundreds of aircraft. And then by 2019, I know that's going to ramp up. But do you have a better number?
No, that sounds about right. It's, when I looked at it, it was about 20 to 30% number of aircraft flying into San Francisco that would have it. But it is a new technology, and Boeing and Airbus, and I believe Embraer too, we're all committed to putting it on future production. So usually anything that's rolling out of the factory today will have it. So I think what was mentioned before, the 737 MAX airplanes that are coming out, all of them will have it. And that's consistent with Airbus too as well. They're putting on a lot of their new airplanes. So the expectation is that the fleet will grow quite rapidly over the next 5 years.
Thank you. Any other roundtable comments? I do have 2 speaker cards for this item. So Terry, sorry, I didn't see you.
No worries. Thank you. Is this going to have the same effect that the RNAV has to bring all the approaches into one railroad, so to speak?
Well, it's in combination with the RFP.
In short, to answer your question, yes. The reason being is that these are approaches and they're very close to the airport, say 10 miles or less typically, although you did see the one that was a little further out. And that's quite typical with approaches that you get on that, you're established, and that you're not doing anything different as far as crossing over, changing, doing other things like that.
So your anticipation that it is just going to be a noise reduction and emission reduction and not a conglomeration of
a distribution?
Yes.
Won't be a distribution.
Thank you.
Any other members like to speak? I do have a number of speaker cards now. It's so
One more. Just
Anne.
And just to, I think, get an understanding of how much that concentration will potentially occur as a result of it. You mentioned also landing in all weather. So that includes fog, and it includes, I'm assuming all weather, wind, fog, rain, so that it will remove the variability we have now on the approaches based on weather, which is obviously significant.
Yes, actually, yes, the system is supposed to operate in all weather, so basically where you could barely see the runway. So it could be fog. If the wind were to come in, then you would enable more approaches or landings to other runways if necessary.
So I think what he says, it would go to a different runway more easily than it does now. And I guess
concentrated.
So if the question is, are we going to, change our runway use based on this technology? No. The runway use is based on the predominant wind direction, and that's not going to change, and we don't expect that to change. The benefits of this is the potential for a higher flight path a little further away from the airport, and that means the flight paths, the arrivals that are going to join those approaches might also be higher. I'm guessing. As we also anticipate that we can get some offset approaches, which would be maybe more over water as opposed to over land. So, those are the things we expect. It does concentrate the flight tracks, but again, the arrivals on the ILSs are also concentrated. They're down a single path right now. So,
Anne, quickly.
Say this. So, going back to the weather-related flights, does this mean that you can land more flights on time so that they can turn around and leave, and we'd have fewer flights pushed from evening to nighttime?
Yeah, that's also one of the reasons we're pursuing this. Is to
So I really like that idea.
Yeah.
That would be lovely. Could we monitor the befores and the afters from that in different weather conditions?
We will definitely be doing that.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to open it up for public comment. Jay Patel. This is on the GBAS system.
My question has to do with the navigation of the individual planes. I think I've mentioned this before, but you might be able to offer some insight. So I'm more concerned about departures, which would be the stick procedure, one left. And you see different flights taking a shorter radius, a longer radius, do the same flights, that same particular plane that comes to SFO and takes stick, one left. Will that always take
Excuse
that
me,
same
Jay?
angle?
Is this have to do with the GBAS system?
Has to do with navigation, so maybe Boeing can offer some insight on navigation. No?
It's more on the arrivals, not departures.
Okay. Well, then, will this be,
Yeah.
I guess, on departures, will this technology be implemented on departures?
Not initially, right? But not initially.
He won't get picked up on TV.
Well, that's okay. Okay. All
Got
right.
it. So well after 2019.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker is Ray Ramos, and followed by Jennifer Landesman, followed by Karen Porter. We're going to move this along because we'll never finish tonight if we don't.
I don't notice anywhere in your plan here for noise monitoring or projections and modeling to indicate how much in decibel level relief there would be for whatever optional landing patterns you may end up with, endpoints at any of the runways. Why isn't that there? I thought this was why we were here, to see what kind of noise relief there would be, rather than strictly allowing greater volume of traffic.
Okay. So the next, Jennifer?
I'll follow up on Ray's question, but first I want to say thank you for the investment if it's for noise. A couple of things concern me. When it says all weather, in one of my greatest points of frustration, I asked Bert, what's going to help us here in Palo Alto? And he said the weather, El Nino. And so the only time we do get a break is during whatever weather it is that gives us a break. So if now all these landings or all these activities are going to happen all weather, it's going to kill us. So I just want to find out how much of the noise is weather, non-weather, and how that's going to affect in terms of overall. The other question I have is there are a lot of procedures that are going to be designed as part of the phase 2 of the select committee recommendations. How would this technology potentially impact the design of those procedures? And definitely, as Ray mentioned, we need noise modeling, because without that, we really can't see the benefits. And these benefits can be seen early on. And, you know, in the mid-2000s, I've got so many papers that talked about CDA, and then there was a whole OPD thing. And it's always about level, you know, sliding down the banister, but it never happens. And there's this whole thing about congestion. There's always a lot of excuses, and I'd like to make sure that that's sorted out now while we have time before anything gets implemented. So what I have is a lot of questions, and also thanks, because if it really is going to help noise, we want to be able to see that. Thank you.
Karen Porter. Karen, what city are you from? Okay. There you go.
So being from Palo Alto, I'm primarily impacted by Menlo Waypoint and I guess the soon-to-be SIDBI waypoint that we've just learned about in the FAA updated report. So my question has to do with one of the FAA's excuse for not increasing the minimum altitude over Menlo beyond 4,000 for instrument flights, or basically any flights, is that the planes have to maintain this 2.85 degree glide slope. So assuming this technology is implemented and they can fly at a higher glide slope, what is your estimate of the resulting increased altitude over Menlo that planes will be able to fly?
Yeah, very good. All right. So you want to finish your comments, and then we'll have them respond. Are you finished with your comment?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe, Bill, would you like to respond how that might help residents over the Menlo Waypoint if, in fact, they can take the glide slope at a steeper, and so the altitude over that waypoint in Menlo Park and Palo Alto, residents may benefit?
Sure, I could try. I don't know the distance between.
Oh, you're not real familiar with that?
No, I'm not,
oh, okay. Well, we have other technical people. Say what?
Well, I think Peter, who is from the neighborhood down there, believes it's about 20 miles from the airport, roughly.
Yeah.
Oh, Peter, didn't see you come in. Hi. Yeah. So, I mean, clearly, just seeing the rough thing, don't you think, Peter, it would definitely make a significant,
absolutely,
a 3.2 glide slope coming up higher and that far out?
2.85 degrees is 4,000 feet.
Yes.
It used to be 5,000 feet, which I believe is
Yes.
above 3% glide slope. So
Yes.
if we can do that with the GBAS, that would be an improvement. And it affects the western part because the Bodega West is that U-turn that comes out, and a lot of the planes that are on Bodega West are already down at 4,000 feet before they make the U-turn. So anything that raises it over Menlo will have a ripple effect throughout Portola Valley, Atherton, Menlo Park as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
A question on that?
Yes, Sue.
So we are talking about noise preservation, right? So we were concerned that once you get these airplanes doing this thing, with Ann's question of stopping some of the backup, we're concerned that we participate before any new airlines or new flight patterns so that we don't cancel out all the good we do. Did I capture that correctly?
Nice comment. Okay. All right. I'm going to close item number 6 and open item number 7. It's a status update, FAA Initiative Phase 2, Technical Working Group follow-up, and our next steps. We had a technical working group meeting, I think November 15th, and the very next day, the FAA presented us with their final draft. So just at the get-go, we're going to have another technical working group meeting where we're going to go into this detail and everything again for everybody so we can truly understand it. I'd like to maybe invite Than if she would be willing to speak to us a little bit about this and your impression of how what we should be looking for, I guess, if you, or whatever you want to say about this item. Than is NorCal TRACON district manager. You run it, don't you? Yeah. She's in denial. Than, thank you. I put you on the spot, but
that's okay.
I really want to hear from you.
I'm Than McLeod. I'm Airspace and Procedures Manager for NorCal. So, can you kind of give me a little bit what you're kind of looking at for, or what you're?
It seems. I mean, in going through the response, a lot of it has to do with if they only do the standard operating procedures. Jean, maybe you could help me ask her a question that she could then expound on about the initiative response.
Well, I would say just like for us, just having received this after the working group, I don't know if Dan had it ahead of time any sooner, but if there are any highlights that she would want to point out rather than trying to address some of our concerns, because we yet don't know what our concerns are going to be.
Right.
Okay. So, no, I did not get it before you. Kind of wish I did. There are a couple things I've noticed reading through it that are just mistakes, but I think that as we work together, I kind of look forward to at least jumping on and actually moving forward on some of the things. I can point out the comments regarding the night and the hush. I know in the report it says that we keep them on, the SOP was changed, and we keep them on until night intersection, and that actually is slightly in error. We actually keep them on the procedure till Rebus intersection. So, and I know that when we first implemented that, we had very good compliance, and then it drifted, and I think that that's human nature, but we are looking into that, and we do aggressively pursue that. So we are putting both Oakland and San Francisco into call for release so that we can get these aircraft in trail and leave them on those procedures up the bay until Rebus, which and by then most of them they're out of 10,000, and I know that altitude isn't the issue. We're going until Rebus. The impact of that, like the report mentioned, was that we did see a very large increase in delays. And at first, it started out a little slow. In the summer months, we had over 600 delays in reportable delays in August. That has gone down partly because the summer traffic went down, but also because we aggressively attacked it with traffic management. We did throw another body at it and had someone sitting there. And so we've gotten better, and the delays are down significantly on that, so that helps because that means that we can continue the procedure. If we can be efficient and do it at the same time as being noise friendly, that's a plus for everyone. So we are getting better and better at keeping that on the night. One of the other procedures that's in the SOP that we did was we've re-emphasized the runway 28 right single file. I know that when I read through here, though, it talks about using that. And that is, again, it is a factor of how many arrivals are coming. When there are arrivals for one runway, and we don't need to have two runways, we will emphasize 28. We have just started a re-emphasis of that. Again, there was drift from that, and it was pointed out, and part of that started with the RSA when we got used to going to the left runway, and now we've got the controllers trained back to going back to the right runway, and we've aggressively started that. So we should be seeing improvement there also.
And that will help Foster City. That will help Foster City a great deal.
And so, yes, and I'll just keep working with Bert. My number one interface is Bert, and I know he's been trying, and I've been the one not able for him to get a hold of. But if we communicate more, then we know how well we're doing. So we'll continue to do that and reach out to him and to find out how well we're doing on those things. I'll just kind of look here because I don't really know what you were looking for. There was a question about the young transition and versus using the offshore. The offshore is a conventional procedure, and I know the report talks about how the FAA's mandate is to go to next-gen procedures, and the offshore is not that. And it was replaced by the young transition that we've never turned on. So we are still using the offshore, and it is not scheduled to be canceled. And it is something that if it's producing what we need, there isn't a plan to cancel this right now, but we do plan on turning the young on. I tried to find out the date of when young's going to be turned on, and all I was told today is that it was delayed again. So it has to do with military airspace way south of us, and so I don't know yet the effective date. I'll also speak a little bit to the stick because, as you know, I heard someone mention the Surfer was amended, and this was for Class B containment. So this was a safety issue that got elevated. We were taking aircraft landing San Francisco, we're exiting the Class Bravo, and we're not allowed to do that. So we had to amend the procedure. By amending it, we're stopping it at Eddy at 6,000. All the instrument approaches are going out to Eddy. They'll all start at 6,000. We did add that new fix called side by. It is not. It doesn't. It is not an IAF. I know the report calls it one, but it is not an IAF, and it does not have an altitude at it. It's only there for Class B containment. It's on the procedure to make sure an aircraft doesn't exit Class Bravo. So it has an altitude restriction of at or above 4,000. That's just for Class Bravo containment. The design of the new procedures are to descend just via eddy direct to the initial approach fix, so HEAM and SEPN on the actual ILSs. So that's how those procedures are supposed to come out. That is on schedule for February of next year, so 2018. So that's the surfer. Now that does not change anything that's in this report about redesigning the surfer to put it back over Big Sur. That is still feasible. It's still been committed. The FAA is committed to doing that. This change to the surfer is only a safety issue to keep it in Class Bravo, and we'll continue on looking at it. As for the altitude, would the GBAS actually increase the altitude? Absolutely could have that potential, and that would be a good thing for all of us. So, yeah, and everything would be affected accordingly, because that's what we're tying into now. We have these ILSs, and we're tying into those, and that sets our altitude, and that just sets our angle. I'm not sure what else you want. The gap. Oh, I did want to mention the gap. I know that there's a lot of comments in the report about the gap not having a top altitude, and the gap does not have a top altitude only because it's a conventional procedure, and the top altitude is not printed on the plate, but by letter of agreement, every straight-out 28 departure is stopped at 3,000. So whether it's printed or not, every 28 straight-out departure is stopped at 3,000. So I just don't want there to be this false hope that we can switch one airplane from one procedure to another and suddenly they won't be stopped. I know that, I did put in, and so there's been a request to add to the night and the hush departure procedures basically over the Golden Gate and out to Gobbs and then south, so a south transition off of those. So we did put in for that. It was deemed feasible. I know it has some restrictions as being on what we can do. I did go ahead and put in for that, thinking that that is part of the process that we'll have to work out the impacts of that. But I went ahead and put that in, thinking let's get that started and get some work going. I think that's really all I have, unless you have some specifics.
Okay. Thank you, Than, very much. So I'm going to ask, if you stay right there for a second, ask any members of the roundtable who, if they have any questions. I'll start with Peter Otaki from Menlo Park first.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation extemporaneously here. Question about Bodega East versus Bodega West. The report, while it talks about addressed concern, and then it refers to the appendix where it talks about all the reasons why it's difficult to use Bodega West, which is the arrival over the bay, U-turn over the bay, versus Bodega East over the bay versus Bodega West, which affects Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and our cities. But I still see in the airport report that for the last several months, despite the encouragement in the report to use Bodega East, there's still 73% use of Bodega West. Has that reached your, trying to encourage the use of Bodega East?
So we can probably do better there, but there are constraints. Now, one of the reasons that we quit using it is we did quit using it considerably after the Asiana accident. So that did have an impact, and so there was a period, and when you look at traffic, you're going to see that, we quit going down the bay after that Asiana accident because we did find that we were having trouble with it. Trouble with the way the controllers were using it. Not that that was a controller accident, they're too high, they're too fast, it's not stable. And so we did put this stop to no, don't take them down the bay. Because we have a lot more room when we're on the west side. And so in order to ensure that all the controllers were doing a stable approach, we made them go that way, but we have retrained it. And we're doing much better. So we ran simulations to teach controllers how to control that down the bay better. And they are doing better. And they actually do like it. The constraints with the down the bay is that we also tried to implement the Oakland departures down the bay, which we've put that in the SOP at the same time. During the nighttime, the southbound Oakland departures, we give them now a left turn to 120 to take them down the bay over Sunny. Kind of keep them also away. Hope, the South Bay communities were asking for that. Well, we did that. We're trying to increase the 50 headings off of San Fran and send them down the bay. We can improve on that one also, and I'll touch on that. But those conflict as well as the Diamond conflicting. So there are going to be conflicts. But all that said, I do think that we can improve, and I don't think that you're going to run into resistance to that. When we can use it, we will.
Thank you very much.
The 50s, just one other comment on the 50s. We should be also using the 50s more off of San Fran. We are amending the SOP. Right now, the 50s are only for aircraft going north and east. We do not have it in our SOP to use a 50 heading for a southbound departure. We will change that.
Any other members of the Roundtable? Sue, DeGree.
I didn't catch the stick part. Did you briefly mention?
So why did stick move, you mean? So stick the criteria on departures for an RNAV departure. So the stick is a direct to fix. So they get to altitude and they go direct to stick. And the criteria is set by flight standards, the division of FAA that's in charge of safety. They changed the flight standards. So the flight standards order 8260.58 changed to say that if you're going to go direct to a fix, that fix must be within 15 degrees of the runway end. And the stick intersection was 22 degrees from one way, one right. So they had to shift it back over the bay a little further. It's about 0.44 miles. They shifted it to keep it within that 15 degrees. That was not a design. It was nothing that we were basically told. We're moving this to keep it in order with criteria. It was a disappointment to us, to air traffic. We're disappointed because it puts it closer to the Oaklands and it makes it that much harder to work. So it was not something we wanted. We did look at, is there an alternative? So, well, what else can we do? The only thing we could do is to change the type of departure procedure that was, and that would make it a course, and then they would have to fly runway heading for a mile, and then they would go direct to fix, and that just completely shuts down our separation. So we didn't have, at the time that we were given that, and it was basically a day, there was nothing we could come up with that would make that work for us. So they moved it.
Okay. Anyone else? I do have some speaker cards. I'll go to Jay Patel from Brisbane on item number 7. Do you want to come up and, Than, are you going to ask a question directly to Than, or are you going to make a comment? Okay. Come on up.
I might have a question for you.
Okay. Okay, you're on.
So my question has to do with stick. Is there any opportunity to get it back to SEPTI or further north? I mean, that was one of the big requests for Brisbane. So can you comment on that?
So the stick, of course, it's a procedure. All procedures can be looked at and they can be redesigned. Where the stick intersection is, or where it currently is, was placed there for procedural separation. So if we move it up north to SEPTI, that it causes separation problems. We're not, as you probably are well aware, we're not really flying that departure procedure during the day very much anyway. Most of them are getting turned right after stick. A lot of them are not going very far north. If you look at the tracks now, I know that there's the slop and but a lot of times they want to turn those guys as soon as they can because we've got the candle coming off and we have to build in separation. Can it be done? Yes. Is it part of this study that to do that? It seemed like every time it was mentioned, it was kind of shut down. The reasoning they kept saying is that the SEPTI wasn't on the stick. And I think maybe a different approach of when we're looking at all this stuff, can we look at the stick and see if there's any way to improve it? Of course, we need to do that when we look at everything.
Okay, thank you.
That'll be very beneficial
Thank you.
because stick has been really bad for Brisbane. and it flies over my house.
All right. So the next speakers for item number 7 is Jennifer Landesman and then Karen Porter. Jennifer?
And I have a question about this putting a route back Surfer to Big Sur. I don't know if everybody's aware, but the select committee voted on that with criteria. And I imagine that when you guys work with criteria, you don't just move the criteria, decide not to use some criteria and to use others. Well, the putting it back formula right now, part of the criteria that was part of the vote, the FAA has said cannot be met. And the criteria was set because there wasn't going to be enough reduction and relief for the communities that needed it downstream. And now, without that criteria, it becomes a completely different formula. And now I've got another question, because during the whole select committee process, you know, citizens and dozens of citizens spent 6 months working on this, because the way it worked is that the FAA asked the community for solutions, which is like, okay, we got ourselves together and provided suggestions for the FAA to fix a problem that we didn't create, but it's okay, we did it. So all along it said that you would also follow NEPA rules, but now I'm hearing that Regional Director Roberts has said that they're going to put the Surfer back to Big Sur without an environmental analysis, with little or any public input. And so that what we voted for is, or the committee voted for, and that we spent 6 months working on, is not going to happen. And further than that, our rights to having an environmental process are gone. So I'm very concerned about that, because this is not a route that's being done for safety. It's being done for noise. So the program objectives should be to meet that and to not break that trust with the community.
Unfortunately, I've not heard. One thing is that you said the criteria changed, and I don't know what in particular you're talking about.
One of the criteria was that the altitude of Menlo should be 5,000 and above, and that can't be.
Okay. So the okay. So I don't necessarily think that you should give up hope on that, because the procedure is going to probably stop before Menlo, and it's going to probably stop at Eddy, this side, at a higher altitude. The other thing, I don't know about the environmental. I've never heard that. I can't speak to it at all. I've not heard that at all. Also, the procedure's not in design yet. So I don't think that anyone has made this decision that we're just going to ignore. We do know that it's going back for noise. We do know that you wanted it higher. You even wanted the Surfer higher. The Surfer can't be higher because the Surfer runs in the face of the departures. When we get back to the Big Sur and it's further west, we can look at what we can do. So I wouldn't give up hope yet. That's all I can say.
Thank you. We need to move on. Okay. So the speakers they really want to talk to you, Than. I've got 3 more cards here. Do you have it in you? Okay. We're going to do Karen Porter again, and then Peter Grace, then Ray Ramos, and Mary Jo Fremont.
So I have just some follow-up questions with regard to the new Surfer Star. First of all, do you have any diagram showing the route? It wasn't included with the report. I couldn't find it anywhere on the FAA website.
I do not yet.
Okay.
I have a picture that I drew, but it's not
based on the coordinates in Google Maps.
It's what we submitted, but it isn't accurate yet. I know that we should have one any day.
Okay.
And I can provide it to the roundtable when we
Thank
get
you.
it.
Okay.
Do you happen to know what modeling the FAA did to determine, assess noise impacts for this and the noise shifting that's going to occur?
So I do know that a noise study was done, and I do know that it qualified for a categorical exclusion, meaning that their results of that noise study said it did not. So, but that's all I know. I'm not involved in that. Sorry.
Sure. Oh, sure. But you know more than I do, for sure. And then, do you know what percentage of flights, as I understand it, if we go to Big Sur, that'll run to maybe to the left. Will there be a percentage of the flights that would have gone to that route that then will be diverted?
No, all the same planes that are on the Surfer will be on the Big Sur.
Okay, then what's the Surfer Star going to be?
It will go away.
It'll go away. This is just a temporary.
I know. Started down
And then, just then, hopefully it'll be a temporary maneuver, but can you expand on the safety considerations having to do with the Class B airspace?
We can't hear you.
Yeah. So a lot of these questions, I really we've kind of gotten a little off course here because we're going to hold a technical working group, and I think that a lot of these questions we will really have more time to delve into. We don't have time tonight for everyone. I'm going to ask that we kind of let Than have her seat now and go on to the next item. And these other speakers, I know that you have very important questions to ask, and I'm going to be hopeful that you can come. Mary Jo, you just arrived. You're going to make a comment, a statement. You just arrived, didn't you? Have you been here? Okay. All right. You want to take? Okay. Yes. Okay, we're really running out of time, but go ahead. Yes. And the other speakers, I'm sorry, you guys, you've had several opportunities to speak right now. We'll cover that in a technical working group. Okay, Mary Jo.
Okay, so my name is Mary Jo Fremont. I'm from Palo Alto. I want to hear Than's comment that these things are not done, but I read the report twice, the FAA response twice, and I'm not optimistic in terms of noise relief. And I really fear that we cannot win. The people who are living near the Menlo waypoint cannot win because when we say, hey, could you route some arrivals from the south to the east side of the bay, then we hear from the FAA, well, no, it conflicts with more planes on Bodega East. And then when we ask to put more planes on Bodega East, then we're told that it conflicts with Diamond. And then when we ask to have planes fly from the south through the Faith Waypoint or similar to the LAX-Oakland route, we're told, no, it conflicts with San Jose. And I'll tell you, at this point, I don't know what you're going to do for us. And what I've been, working on this for 2.5 years. I've spent, hundreds of hours, like many other people. And there are solutions. If you talk to experts, if you were to design with noise in mind, you would find solutions. But I have not seen in this FAA response, which took a year to come through, any relief for the people living near Menlo. And we're talking not more than 150 planes on your heat map. We're talking 300 planes. I want to see these heat maps. And I want to see that concentration. I want to see these cells. Because this is hell. There is no reason for these flights at night to fly over Palo Alto, Menlo Park, when there is no aircraft in the whole Metroplex. That's what we're getting. I can show you my startjetnoise.net. I wake up multiple times a night at 1, 2, 3, 4. And after 3 days, yes, I have to sleep because I'm completely sleep deprived. So I want the FAA to really own the problem and find solutions.
Thank you. All right, Mary Jo, thank you. Okay, we're going to close this item and just reassure you that James is going to be sending out to the Roundtable membership some dates in January for a technical working group, and we'll make sure it's publicized, and we'll make sure that we have a nice long time to talk about these things, okay? Item number 8. This item to discuss, it's just for information. We're not going to take any action, but at our working group, actually, San Francisco Supervisor Asha, I think it was your aide, Kathy Monkeymeyer, she brought up the idea of maybe what we should look at is having a panel of medical professionals, say from UCSF or Stanford, to come and talk to us either at the roundtable and give presentations about the deleterious health effects of airplane noise. And so I just wanted to bring this to the Roundtable membership as a whole to kind of get your input on that, whether or not you feel that would be helpful. I know that at our legislative working committee, we had talked about what Congress has in the pipeline as far as some health studies, but that goes slowly. So would it be something that you would feel helpful, that would give us any ammunition to work with, to go back to the FAA and to the airport if possible on that? So just out to the members for comments.
I think Ms. Degree's been the leader on this.
Sue?
So long ago.
I phased out there. Would you like to do that again?
This is your issue.
Yes. Part of me is saying, do we really need to hear any more about health? We already know it, but I'll go for backup.
Well, if not, I mean, it just seemed like in our discussion at the technical working group meeting, I think, Ann, you were there, and it sounded like it would be something that might benefit us.
At bare minimum, creating a baseline of the types of noise, the types of related problems, and I think it would be a good start.
Okay.
I'm assuming they're going to agree with us wholeheartedly, so we'll move forward.
I guess, yeah. Well, anyway, let's just leave it at that and move on. We'll just kind of think about it, and we'll talk about Rick.
I concur with those thoughts. I would like to hear about the health impacts.
Okay. Yeah. And if we had a panel of local medical professionals that can maybe really give us the information. And I know I read about it all the time. People send me emails, right? But something to think about. So items numbers 9 and 10. Okay, I'm going to give you the update on the South Bay Roundtable formation. I had a couple of emails back and forth with Andy, who is the chair of the Cities Association of Santa Clara County, and they've had scheduling difficulties. They're scheduling a meeting January 25th. I think Bert has been invited to attend. I've been invited to attend. They're going to try to put their roundtable together. The San Jose airport is not really interested in doing what San Francisco Airport has done for us. So they're kind of having some organizational challenges, as you can imagine, putting together their group of roundtable. But that leads into the discussion that I'd like to have a little bit of maybe expanding our table to allow 2 representatives from the South Bay and to get your thoughts on that in the interim. Because as you can tell, we have, this is a regional issue. We have people from Santa Cruz who've come here, from Santa Clara County, Palo Alto, and I think it's something that would not harm our roundtable, but I'd like to hear from you about what your thoughts might be on that. Anne?
Well, I would just encourage all my colleagues here to consider sort of the attendance that we've heard even tonight, and as we have over the last year and even beyond that. Because obviously when the roundtable, I think, was set up back in 1981, it was designed obviously to address the impact of noise from San Francisco. And as the air traffic and the Metroplex, et cetera, has obviously grown, I think clearly the impact has extended beyond what we originally conceived, which was San Francisco and San Mateo. Mm-hmm. And I know that in the past we had some objections potentially to adding additional members, with the feeling being it might dilute some of our effectiveness. But frankly, I think now I've come to the opinion that it's actually been reversed, because what we really need are more voices. Because what we saw, I think, with the select committee and with this body is that the more we can involve our national representatives, the more strength we're going to have. So that means we'll have additional congressional representatives, we'll have more of a voice with the FAA, in addition to the great channels that I think have been developed locally. I think obviously we're looking for some longer term legislative relief and other ways in which we can move this forward and really start to see the changes at the top levels of the FAA as well. So from my perspective, I think it would be a win for us to include a Santa Clara and potentially Santa Cruz individual to join in this discussion, since clearly they are also being impacted tremendously by all the growth at San Francisco.
Thank you. Sue?
Yes, I was one who was concerned about dilution. And over the period of time, I agree with Ann. I also think that it also enables us to say that we don't just deal with San Francisco Airport, but that we also have to deal with Oakland and San Jose. So that'll require some changes. So I would like to see that definitely done. I think it's going to take public pressure. So the more voices we have and the more connections we have and try to collaborate and coordinate that, I think the better.
Okay.
And we'll keep our mandate, of course, so everybody knows that we're very cautious about the shifting.
Mm-hmm. Peter?
I just wanted to concur with the points that Ann made, and just to reiterate. One, the noise footprint from the arrivals, particularly with NextGen, impacted Santa Clara County and Santa Cruz County. Two, it's not dilutive. It actually magnifies their voice by having representatives from those two counties. And three, that the leverage point we have is through our federal representatives. So the fact that we actually can include a couple more districts helps, again, to magnify our voice. So I concur with the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other roundtable members want to comment on this?
Okay.
Okay, Ann.
My normal cohort are not here tonight. I am concerned because I've been on the roundtable now almost 2 years, and 80% of the discussion has been on arrivals. And when you add two counties that are mainly dealing with arrivals, I'm concerned that we will forget, and I thank all of you for putting up with my backblast stories, that we also have departure issues, and we also have run-up issues, and we have the standard backblast, and that is why I'm concerned. I will also say I'm concerned because for 18 years I lived in Mountain View as the little sister to Palo Alto, and I watched how Palo Alto could quite often change what we could do in Mountain View because they were politically more powerful than Mountain View, and they were financially more powerful. So now that I'm back in my hometown that is not as wealthy as some of the towns south of me, I'm a little worried about economic diversity. What little I know about the shifting of flights down in Santa Clara County was fine if you shifted over the part of Sunnyvale east of the 101. Okay, that's the lower income part of Sunnyvale. I will always be worried that we're shifting things into lower income areas, wherever those lower income areas will be, because historically they have less political power than people who have money. So I'd like to say that I'd be open to this if I can make sure that all forms of noise get equal representation. And in time, we need to look at how the airports fit with all the other modes of transportation, be that high-speed rail or shuttles or anything else like that. But that's long been my concern because I had firsthand dealings of it when I lived in Mountain View.
Okay. Any other roundtable member would like to speak? Yeah, Mark?
Just briefly, I concur with my colleagues to the left. It makes us more relevant, more valuable as a body to everyone, and especially to SFO, to have those additional voices at our table on a regular basis.
Okay.
Can I just add one comment?
Yes, Supervisor.
You know, with the creation of the Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Roundtable, you know, we're going to have to work really hard to make sure we coordinate our efforts in
Yes.
that. And it is particularly demanding for SFO staff in that
Yes.
I don't think you want two bodies talking to you about the same flight or the same procedures. So, to the extent that they representatives from those counties, if they part of this effort, maybe that would help the coordination between these roundtables, because many of the issues they face in the south, those southern counties, we face the same flight pattern affects all three counties. So we had to figure out a way to work together.
Anyone else? Carrie? I can see you.
I'm torn on this, because while I think that sometimes you get more people, you can get more strength, you can also dilute the focus, and we're adding another airport to the mix so that we're adding more confusion as to what our focus is. And I do believe that the communities to the north, other than San Francisco, get the short end of the stick. We're on the departure side. We get a lot more intense noise from departures than from arrivals, which tends to be a softer and maybe more continuous noise. But we have been spending a lot of time on the southern county area, and the noise that's going on there, while it's really important, we haven't had a lot of relief that we've seen on the North Bay communities, Daly City, South San Francisco, Brisbane, which are the poor communities comparatively, and it's with the departures. So I tend to agree with Anne that it's hard to be able to combine the two problems.
Okay. Ann Wingert?
Can I just add one thing that I understood, and I knew that this potentially would surface, but one of the things I looked at when I was looking at the select committee recommendations as well as our recommendations was to see, did it seem particularly skewed towards arrival versus departures? And there's actually a great mix of recommendations that we made for both.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's the regional approach that we've now had to adopt because of the impact of all of the communities that have been included that wouldn't have been included at the time the roundtable was formed. I think as well as some of the on-the-ground issues that clearly are departure issues, which are run-ups and backblasts. I think there's been an expansion overall of the approach to looking at the problem, to include on-site issues that clearly are departure issues only, as well as the ones that clearly are being addressed by the FAA right now that Than just went through. So there's I think there's a big number of issues on both sides of it. So I think that this group has done a really good job. We all represent our communities, but on the other hand, I think there's a very open-minded approach to trying to help the entire region. And that takes us beyond the individual concerns of our own communities. Mm-hmm. So I would just encourage that, because I think that is going to be a win for us all.
So, Ken? Yeah, good.
As I fade out into the sunset here,
I was going to acknowledge you about that. Yes.
I just want to say that in my 20 years on this roundtable, it has expanded significantly, and the issues, and especially in the last few years, what's happened. So I think the concern is that it can't all be handled in this 2 hours, and that we're going to have more meetings. We're going to have to be a little more organized as far as these technical workshops, because every issue is important, and every issue needs to have maybe its own consultants and its own studies. And so as much as the entire roundtable may be just a concern, with the South Bay and the North Bay and everything in between, I'm in San Bruno. I got to worry about what my communities. My neighbor is South City, and also Millbrae. So we're gonna concentrate more on how those things. But collectively, we can make policies for the entire region, these meetings here are going to have to be a little more condensed, a little more organized, and then we can take care of the details, in other meetings, which is something that we haven't done. We've gone from monthly meetings to quarterly meetings to bi-quarterly meetings and stuff. Now I think it's, we're going to have to look at a lot more, which means maybe a lot more involvement with our consultants, with our airport staff, and with our representatives.
Sure, absolutely. Sue?
As I said before, I was concerned about dilution, and there is a prevailing, I think, across all the counties, our county, that there might be, money and political power that goes into play, and I think that's really out there. That concern is there, and looking at that, I think we have a better control so that doesn't get out of control because we are all under one umbrella. And we may also have to think of going back to monthly meetings.
Okay. All right. So I've got some speakers slips on this item. There are 2. I'll open it up to public comments unless somebody else wants to say something. Anybody else? Okay, about this? And then I'll wrap it up because I know James has his own concerns about logistics and things like that. Well, if we do something like that. So I've got Jennifer Landesman and Karen Porter. And it is 9 o'clock.
Apologies for my outburst about East Palo Alto. But East Palo Alto is one of the areas that is most impacted by arrivals and by this whole situation. It is a social justice community, and the people there they do not complain, they work 2 jobs, but the noise is there. And when we have noise maps and everything is there, you will see that noise has been shifted to East Palo Alto, and this has been a very democratic process in terms of making sure that everybody has a lot of noise. No, you said that you're concerned that people that somehow it feels that you guys are perfect and you don't do any noise shifting, but if there should be wealthy, outspoken Palo Alto, that we would move noise to somebody, when East Palo Alto has deposits and deposits of noise right now. And so I'm just pointing out that this whole thing is not about whether it's a wealthy person or a poor person, this is about health. And if we're really talking about noise, thank you, the gentleman from San Bruno. This is about organizing oneself a little bit better, having better arrangement of things, because I think that there's a lot that people can offer in terms of overall policy issues, and we will all win that way. But this way, everybody is just, working their own thing and not really advancing. So I would encourage, by the way, I'm not saying I want to join the roundtable necessarily because I disagree with the whole let's not shift noise, because now after next gen, that's what it is. And we have to have different designs and we have to organize things in a better way. And I think that just wastes a lot of time, not to mention that it's not an objective measure. Anyway, thank you. I just want to point out that this is not about who has money, who has voice. And the idea that I haven't tried paying anybody off to see if they could fix the noise.
All right.
But I doubt that's possible.
Jennifer, thank you very much. All right. Karen, we're going to move it along, okay?
Okay. I might be a follow-up on that. It would just be one vote. I think it's the fear that somehow, one representative from Santa Clara County would overtake the roundtable is a little overblown.
Okay, thank you. All right. Oh, yes.
Can I just, thank you. I just want to make a quick comment. I understand that part of the debate is about takeoff and landing and some of the, that's what's being considered here at this moment. One suggestion could be maybe we could have a biannual or annual where we invite the South Bay Roundtable or the East Bay Roundtable, and we could all get together and have a joint meeting. I mean, we often do that with multiple bodies that have overlapping interests, but we don't necessarily need to have a seat of that voice on it. Just something to consider. I'm not saying I'm for or against it. I know that a lot of people take time to come here, and we have folks that we're hearing as far as San Jose and Santa Clara County and Santa Cruz and so on. I get emails literally on a daily basis from multiple constituents, and I know Ivar, the director of the airport, knows as well. So they just don't show here. I mean, we have 5 or 6 that will consistently come from San Francisco, but I get a consistent stream, and I don't know if other representatives in this body do. Some may not, but I think that having that balance is fine. I don't have a problem with it, but I think also another suggestion could be you could have a joint meeting at some point.
Okay. Anyone else? So I put on here that we could take action on this if we wanted to tonight with a vote. My sense is, I'm not sure whether or not we want to do that.
Well, actually, no, you cannot take a vote on this tonight because I don't have the text amendment in front of you. So you can take action to tell me to come back to the next meeting with the text amendment because again, and I might have mentioned this in the past when this has come up in conversation, this is an amendment to MOU, and it's 2 steps. 1, I need a 2/3 majority vote of text of what it's going to look like on how we include the additional counties. And 2, you all need to go back to your councils and have them approve it. And so 2/3 a majority of the current membership needs to be in the affirmative in order for the MOU to be amended to that.
So it's not something that's going to happen like immediately, but I think that the process could be started, and we could look towards our next meeting to have, maybe what we could do is do a little ad hoc committee to maybe work with James on the text and the structure. Does that sound reasonable? So that we could, because, you know, my sense is that we'd want an elected official, 2 elected officials, not a private resident, right? And so then how would that look like? And again, we don't know if they even want to do that, right?
So along those lines, I would advise that would probably be the appropriate route to go, because what that would allow that group to do is to go over that, but then also maybe discuss other options, such as what was discussed earlier here, to say, these are maybe some other ideas if it's not palatable to go through this entire process or whatever the case may be. But I think it would be advisable to convene a group to discuss the matter.
Okay, who would like to? Would you like to be?
Make a comment. I wasn't volunteering.
Oh, okay. Oh, you raise your hand, Okay. Make a comment then. Thanks.
No, my one comment is for someone who represents the city sort of smack dab on the peninsula, I feel as though the I think strong advocacy that Ann articulated was persuasive. I think, as this issue has sort of become more regional and affected more of our rivals, I think their interests align with ours, and so I think there is strength in numbers. I don't think that's mutually exclusive with the concern of our partners to the North Peninsula, who want to make sure that we don't completely tilt towards a focus just on arrivals. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that we're concerned both about departures and arrivals. I don't feel like there's that we're at odds here. I would be interested when this comes back to hear from staff about whether or not this expansion of the roundtable would create undue pressures and I just want to make sure that there's resources to manage all this, and I want to make sure that the focus isn't disproportionately on arrivals.
Of course.
I think we can, as long as we can do that, I think it's a win-win.
Of course. Rick, okay.
And I like Doug's comments. I feel the same way. I think as long as we make sure that we're dealing with the people in the north, Colma, South City, San Bruno, Millbrae, Burlingame, the departure sounds, definitely.
Thank you. good. All right, so we all like what Doug said, and I love what Ann said. So who would like to be on the little ad hoc committee to work something up with James? Ann?
Yep, I'm
Okay.
happy to help. But
And,
we want somebody from the North
Pete-
County, too,
yes,
because
yes,
I
yes.
Definitely want.
Rick?
Is San Mateo North?
Oh.
Yeah, you're in the middle. How about one in the middle, too? Rick could do it.
Yeah, we'll recommend
Yeah.
San
Okay,
Bruno. It's on
I'll
its way
join.
anyway.
I'll join. Yeah.
And then one north.
One,
Then
two
it's
north.
Then it's an even group.
Yeah. One north. Terry?
I'm good.
I hate to say, I work a day job. It makes it really difficult to add on extra
Oh,
committee
yeah,
work.
That's tough.
Elizabeth, I'm happy to do it, but I don't know if this will remain my committee assignment.
Yeah.
So that's,
No.
I won't know that until January.
Okay, okay.
I'm okay with North.
Sue
All right.
could- Sue could
Sue can do it. Okay, so so we've just created this ad hoc committee with Sue Degree, Ann, and Rick, and myself.
I would
And
just,
What about you?
That's
Yes.
a nice committee.
as
Three is
one
perfect.
comment, I would just like to make sure that the ad hoc committee reaches out to Santa Clara and to the other county to see if they're interested before we go through the.
Exactly. So with your permission, I'm going to be meeting with the City Select Committee, not the Cities Association Committee on January 25th in their organizational meeting. Now, I can offer that up, and this could all be for naught, okay? Is that all right if I do that?
good.
Okay, great. All right. We're going to, I know, let's see, do we have a speaker slip? Yeah. Jennifer, did you really want to say something about it? Okay. All right. So item number 11, discussion and direction to noise abatement officer to create an easy-to-read instruction to request community noise monitor. This came up at the technical working group meeting because we were saying, well, Bert, how do we get a noise monitor? So Bert, you're going to talk to us about this.
I'm actually going to be exceptionally quick. The easy way to do it is to call our office and ask for one. If you live near a noise monitor, we will actually offer you the data from that noise monitor already. Or if we have done portable noise monitoring in your community, we'll offer you the reports for those. So it'll be up to the citizen at that point. If you're within a half mile of a noise monitor, your odds of getting one are slim, mainly because we have one there. We can give you the data from it right away. And so we like to go, the simple way is just call and ask. We're happy to talk you through it.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to our other matters, aviation noise, news, and updates. Yes. Oh, Sue.
Thanks a lot. No, can we agendize discussing noise monitors, like there's the issue of 55 over 65? Can we put that on the agenda to talk about it sometime?
We
you can't
the
do about it now.
DBL, the CNEL?
Because they were changed at one time. I want to know why, and in the 21st century, why can't we go to the 55? I mean, I'd like to have that agendized.
Okay. All right. So
Thank you.
noted. Gene, we're going to let Gene, I'm going to give him 5 minutes. He's got a 25-minute presentation on stage 5 aircraft.
Actually, I don't have that long. I figured we would go long today. I do have 2 noise news or updates to provide. One is on the Stage 5 noise regulation. On November 3rd this year, 2017, the FAA adopted Stage 5 noise standards for newly manufactured aircraft. It's equivalent to the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, their Chapter 14 noise standard. It is a 7 dB reduction from Stage 4. It also is at least a 1 dB reduction from Stage 3 at each of the 3 certification points. There's an arrival point, a departure point, and a sideline point. And while you get a 7 dB reduction from Stage 4, that's putting them all together. But sometimes you don't get a reduction everywhere, But this standard actually says you will get a reduction of at least 1 dB from stage 3 levels with the stage 5. As of December 31st of this year, any aircraft that's newly manufactured, leaves the factory essentially, and weighs more than 121,000 or so pounds, must meet stage 5. And for those aircraft weighing less than that, they must meet stage 5 in 2020, or by the end of 2020. And the difference there is, I know 121,000 pounds seems arbitrary, but it's really thinking about the predominant commercial jets like the 737s and those types of aircraft are at that weight and above, and then your smaller like regional jets are the ones that are below. And the reason for that is that technology with the aircraft you see more of, like the 737s, the A320s, the technology exists to have them a little bit sooner than the smaller regional and general aviation type jets. And then the second one is that on November 30th of 2017, this is related to the Phoenix case that we talked about, I believe, at the last meeting. There was an update. The city of Phoenix and the FAA petitioned the court. The court order was to restore all the procedures prior to the implementation of NextGen at Phoenix. The FAA and the city have petitioned the courts together. This is a joint petition to actually not restore all of them, but to restore the 9 departure procedures that were specifically published on 9/18 of 2014, so September 18th of 2014. So this is, I think, monumental because the city and the FAA agreed on those which 9 procedures that they will restore and then work to modify those. So it seemed like a win-win there for the two agencies to come together and put in a joint petition. So any questions on either of those?
I have just a quick question. So were the departures the killer? I mean, were they the thing that was the most disruptive and the arrivals were not so disruptive?
So the way I understand it is that the issues were really about these 9 departures. There were a lot of other departures, even other arrivals. So it's not even all the departures. It's a specific 9 departures that the city and the FAA agreed were the issues.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so item 13, member communications and announcement. Well, I was going to make an announcement that our long-standing, probably the longest-standing Roundtable member, Ken Ibarra, this is his last meeting with us.
That's right.
And so we will have a reso for you of next
Have to come back?
meeting. I have to come back, and we're going to have to give you a proclamation. So tell us how it has been.
Well, it's the short story is that I was appointed in April of 1996, and I was appointed to be the alternate for the Roundtable back then. And back then, Mary Griffin was on the Roundtable, amongst others, and I wanted to be the head representative, but my predecessor, Chris Pallas, was a longtime Roundtable member. So I defeated him in 2005, and so then I was able to be the representative. So for the last 17 years, so full 22 years on this Roundtable, and it has been, it's necessary. It's done a lot of things. When I came on, we were finishing up the installation programs, and then going through more, refinements of the installation programs. Noise in San Bruno has been the same, basically, and that whole time. But I can truly empathize with the other communities. I can't imagine what they've been going through the last couple of years, and how we, or if I was your representative, how I would have to, really advocate for that. But this board is very necessary, and I appreciate all the service that's gone on. And you will have, a strong representative from San Bruno as my replacement. Thank you.
Your presence will be missed. Your historical knowledge, will and perspective also. So good luck in what you're doing next.
Your vice chair is not that. He's not that new.
Much older than you, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Any other member communications or announcements? Yes, Supervisor.
Yeah. I wanted to give a little update. At the last meeting, I talked about the idea of engaging Congresswoman Pelosi. I know that Congresswoman Eshoo and Congresswoman Spear have done an admirable job of pushing this conversation forward on the FAA. And as this report shows, they've been able to get some progress there and put it on the radar. I've had some more additional conversations with our new director of the airport. It is my belief that San Francisco Board of Supervisors has a special authority to regulate noise at the airport. It is probably the only legislative body short of Congress that has that authority. I've asked the San Francisco City Attorney's Office to investigate that. We're going to move conversations forward with our director. I believe that the vortex generator conversation, 5 years, I don't believe is a sufficient amount of time. I think that we should be using incentives. We should be trying to use the idea of incentive system at the San Francisco Airport, and it's worked in Heathrow International Airport. They've seen a reduction in noise of over 15%. So I think we have some tools at our fingertips that we haven't necessarily accessed. So we're going to continue to push that conversation. We sent a letter to Congresswoman Pelosi and Senator Feinstein. We CC'd Mayor Lewis of Atherton, along with all of the commissioners on the San Francisco Airport Commission. We've had conversations with them. We just reappointed a new commissioner, Commissioner Guggenheim, and I made that appointment not pro forma. We actually called him in front of the Rules Committee, which I chair, and we put on the agenda that airport noise was one of the most important things that we're dealing with, not just in San Francisco, but on the entire peninsula and the area. It's an important issue that not many people are really paying attention to. And as the representative from San Bruno has said, they've lived with it for many years. There's people that have lived in the same homes that I represent for 30, 40, 50 years that never had noise. And because of NextGen, are experiencing that noise that you have lived with and other communities have lived with for years. And it is jarring, for lack of a better word. And some of them have been here, and what all I can say is people are losing their mind, and not in a figurative sense, but in a literal sense. And so I just want you to know that I volunteered. I said this before. I volunteered to be on this body. It had been empty for over 8 years from San Francisco, and I think that was a disservice to this roundtable and to the Bay Area. And so we're going to continue to engage and push the issue forward.
That's really, really wonderful. Thank you.
Best news of the night.
Yes, that's the best news of the night. Yeah, yes. Okay.
And one last thing, and I was on the phone with the Chief of Staff of Pelosi on the way over here to highlight this letter to him. It had not been on his radar. He hadn't seen a copy. It probably went into the office, and he's going to speak with the Speaker. And I did speak with Senator Feinstein's Chief of Staff this afternoon as well. So we're going to keep pushing the conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Can I ask
Sue?
something else on the agenda?
Oh, gosh. Okay.
So, I think as a body, we should know before it happens so that we could have some input, because it's going to relate to noise, is when new companies want to come in and when present companies want to add more flights. I really think that should pass before us. So I'm assuming that has to be agendized, and along the way, I think we should know if the airport has entertained a cap of any kind. And also, I came in a little bit on the negative side, and I feel much better with the input from everyone, including the public.
but I like the positive attitude that Sam McLeod always puts. I really, really appreciate you, and you back your words up. So, and that's been evident. And also with our director, I have your name right. I really appreciate you've been very honest with us and definitely follow through. So it's very encouraging.
Thank you. Okay. All right. We've run over quite a bit, and I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. All right. We'll
care.
meet again. We're going to have a technical working group in January. Everyone have
Merry
a
Christmas,
great
happy
holiday.
holidays.
Take some cookies. Ray,
Take
we'll
it
get
with
to you
you.
next time.
How you doing, Glenn? You seem to have a little cold or something.